Okay, it is 7:03, and we have a quorum. So, noting that hour and the presence of our quorum, I'll call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Members of the public who wish to watch our meeting can do so online at ActonTV's YouTube channel, ActonTV.org. Thank you to ActonTV for recording and posting our meetings. Welcome, everybody. I do want to point out, I sat down this evening and I had no paper at my desk. Typically there's a chair's agenda that tells me what's going on and what's happening. Tonight is the first night that we are fully on a digital platform for all of our agendas, all of our content. We're actively looking for feedback from the community as you try and find our information. Hopefully it should be better. You should be able to digitally search all of our meeting minutes and agenda items and packet items to make it easier to see our information. And I do want to put a big thank you out to the gigantic staff of Peter Light and Julie Lalumiere, who have single-handedly gotten us on board this platform and put all of the content up there. So thank you, Peter and Julie, for all of that work. It's great to be on something a little bit more modern than scanned images of PDFs.
And I'll add Andrew Shen to that as well, because he had to go in and make sure all of the policies were accurate and everything else. So.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Super excited to be moving forward with this. All right, first item on our agenda this evening is recognition from the Mass Association of School Superintendents. Peter.
All right, so we're going to go up to the microphone out there, Adam, and if we could have Anoushka Sudhanand and Rishi Dasari come on up as well. Well, that's easier said than done. So for the school committee and members of the community who are here, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents allows school districts of up to 5,000 students to nominate 2 students each year to receive the MASS, Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Academic Excellence Award. And so the way we do that is we reach out to the high school and we allow the high school to find 2 students that they believe would be deserving of this. And so what I'd like to do is actually read a couple statements that we received from your counselors. So Anoushka, I'll start with you. And this is from Ms. Morrissey. From an academic perspective, Anoushka is the most exceptional student I have had the pleasure to work with. She has taken exclusively honors and AP courses at ABRHS and has excelled in this challenging course load. Anoushka is excited to study biomedical engineering as an undergraduate. Anoushka's care for her community is a defining aspect of her character. Her work at the Acton Library and co-founding the Think Aloud Learning TAL organization demonstrate her empathy and commitment to social causes. Anoushka strongly believes that academic tutoring should be accessible to all students and that learning to manage the rigors of high school is as important as knowing the core curriculum. To address these 2 crucial issues, she conceptualized and co-founded the TAL organization, which provides free of charge math, science, and English tutoring for middle school children. Anoushka's dedication to this cause is a testament to her character and desire to impact her community positively. So congratulations, Anoushka, on being one of the 2 recipients of this award. Okay, and Rishi, this is from Ms. Gable. Academically, Rishi is one of the strongest students in his class of superstars, as we have just learned. Beyond academics, Rishi has pursued meaningful extracurricular activities that reflect his commitment to personal growth and community service. Rishi has volunteered in both a hospital and a medical office, gaining valuable insights into the healthcare field and solidifying his goal to pursue a career in medicine. Rishi demonstrates dedication and has the ability to go deep in each of his endeavors, whether that is practicing the piano or competing at a high level in tennis. With all of these accolades, one attribute that cannot be measured is his genuine curiosity about others others and his ability to connect with a wide variety of people. An example of this was when Rishi and I took a walk outside on a beautiful day last spring. What struck me was the number of students who enthusiastically said hello to Rishi. I felt like I was walking with the mayor of AB.
All right. Up next is our student representative update. Welcome to our student reps, monthly visit from them to give us some student perspectives on the current events at the high school. I believe we've got a couple student reps here. Come on up. Check the switch on there too.
Okay, guys, this mic is always too high and never ever on. But hi, everyone. I'm Diksha. I'm a junior at AB, and this is my third term as a student representative. I'll give a few very brief updates. Something I would like to touch upon is the MCAS ballot question this year. So this was a discussion that I was having with peers in my political science class, and just something that has been going around in the school as well. There's definitely two different stances. Some people believe that the structure is necessary. Some people believe that it provides, it gives unnecessary pressure on students. And so it was discussed in political science classes this week, and it was a very interesting discussion. Second update is that HOCO is next week. Homecoming. We call it HOCO fondly. The theme is disco. If any of you are willing to chaperone, we would love to see more chaperones. We also had the Mid-Autumn Festival this afternoon. Clubs such as the Korean Language Club, Day, the Dear Asian Youth Club, and others organized this event to celebrate this festival that's celebrated in many East Asian cultures, and lots of food, crafts, and music were involved. So just a few updates. I'm very excited for this coming year. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Diksha.
Hello, I'm Austin, a senior at the high school, and I come here today not as a member of Resource Force, but as a member of the high school, and specifically a school committee representative. Last year, you might remember me because I came here for Resource again and again. And principally, I recognized that at the high school, many of us care about climate action. So I thought to myself, why don't I just run and get the opinion of the school body? And you can see the result right here. And day by day, climate action is imperative because we cannot just wait. As you may have heard one of our members say, as the award-winning author Bill McKibben once said, winning slowly is the same as losing, and every single day we see climate change getting worse, as we have seen with Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helen. So we urge a vote on the decarbonization resolution as soon as possible, and we urge an annual progress report on climate actions, because empty words do not bring action, results do, and we hope to see those in an annual progress report. Additionally, most of us at the high school do not appreciate the door policy. Although we recognize that it's state policy and state law, so we can't really just absolve all of it, there is one key area we'd like to recognize that we could change. Specifically, the tennis court door in the morning, where the junior parking lot is. So it could be a little bit easier for the juniors to enter the school through that area. Also, many of us do not agree with the activities fee because it feels antithetical to the school community as a whole. Because extracurriculars are meant to be a place where we come together as a community, come together as a school, and kind of making it uninclusive just doesn't feel quite right. Lastly, I'm sure that many of my representatives would agree with me. The role of the school committee representative thing is rather vague and nebulous, and it just doesn't feel like we know what you want to know of us. So we would want to have further communication in the future, whether it be online through email or specifically more questioning and more communication during the meetings between you, the school committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin.
Hi, I'm Julia. It's also my third year here as a school committee rep. I'm mostly just saying hi for today. It's them that's presenting, but since it's the first meeting. So it's good to be back. I just want to reiterate kind of what Austin said about the communication. We would love to hear from you guys about what we can do for you, and then similarly, that way we can share with you what you can best do for us. So just getting more communication that way would be great. All right, see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you all. All right, next item is public participation. So per our policy BEDH, members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes. Public participation will only take place at this time during our meeting. Speakers must be recognized by the chair before speaking, and the committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. Hi, Becky.
Hi. Thank you, Adam. I'm Becky Neville, and I'm a Boxborough resident. And I was a member of the Budget Skeptics focus group held by the consultant you hired to find budget structural changes that will make the school operating budget more affordable to the towns. It was hosted last Wednesday. It was me and 4 other members of the Acton and Boxborough communities. The superintendent, in his email, specifically called it a focus group for budget skeptics. It started with introductions, and then David James, the consultant, asked the 5 of us what we thought the elementary schools did well and what we could do to improve them. At which point, the 5 of us community members were confused. None of us have elementary-aged children. In fact, my kids are 35, 36, and 37. But it was clear David James was also confused. Since it appears that our opinion on budget changes was not the purpose of the focus group, I would like to take the time now to let the school committee and the school administration know that how this budget skeptic feels. I feel the school district needs to make structural changes to the operational budget because Boxborough certainly cannot afford double-digit increases every year. It does not appear the consultant has been charged with looking at making structural changes you touted last year during the budget process. I think I can safely say we were all really angry because once again, the school committee and the administration said one thing, we're going to hire a consultant to look at structural changes, which cost the district $150,000, and then do something else. You hired a consultant to look at ways to improve the elementary schools, which means spending more money, not making necessary cuts. It feels to me, I dare say all of us, that the superintendent can now say budget skeptics participated in a focus group, box ticked. Without meaningful structural changes to the way the school district operates and to the budget, you will continue to spend more than the 2 towns can afford. I would think you pay the superintendent of schools $285,000, and he should be able to do the analysis and make the recommendations to this board. In closing, I would like to say that if the school committee and school administration cannot live up to their promise to the taxpayers to find savings that will help mitigate the budget increase, I will work hard against any operational override in Boxborough. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public? Mr. Balalescu.
Good evening. Oh, is this on? Yes. For the folks watching at home, my name is Mike Balulescu. I'm an Acton resident, RJ Gray parent, and president of the ABEA, our district's teachers union. I imagine there are few teachers watching me speak tonight. Most of our educators are busy planning for tomorrow, while also looking forward to a well-deserved 3 days off. The Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day long weekend is an inflection point in the school year. We've moved past the icebreakers, name games, and important work of establishing classroom norms and routines. As teachers, we're beginning to understand the complexity of our students' strengths as well as their needs. This time of year is also an inflection point for you all as next year's budget starts to take shape. After all, it was about this time last year that Steve Noon presented in this room about the looming health insurance storm that would define last year's budget crisis. I know that this committee is engaged in important work right now to include diverse voices in our budgeting process and make sure that the needs of taxpayers are centered in your discussions. However, I want to make sure that you and everyone watching tonight understands that the success of the override does not mean that we've fully addressed the needs of our schools. Remember, we are now in our third year of budget cuts. If you ask our teachers how they're doing so far this year, most of them will tell you that they're overwhelmed. At the preschool and elementary level, our educators continue to struggle with unprecedented levels of student dysregulation. At R.J. Gray, the budget reduced an 8th grade English teacher, the effect of which has watered down and weakened the teaming model that has served our adolescents so well for decades. And at the high school, our educators continue to work heroically to address student mental health needs, while our district again and again asks what more they can pile on their plates. Because it's in your power to fix these problems right now, but because we as a community need to make sure we give equal weight to the needs of our staff as we do the needs of our taxpayers. Don't forget that our students and teachers still have unmet needs. Don't forget the struggles of our educators on the front lines every day trying to provide dynamic, transformational education in an era of austerity budgets. As you spend the coming weeks and months talking about plans for the next fiscal year, don't forget that our students and teachers need you to fight for them too. Thank you.
Hi, Judith Ehrenstein. I live in Acton, and I'm part of Mothers Out Front. And I was glad to hear Austin speak, talking about the resource force. I was looking at your, the district's beginning the process of vision of a graduate. And so I actually Googled, what's a vision of a good graduate? And this is not about AI, but the whole AI thing came up. So I thought, what is in here? So, you know, there's a lot of really important qualities that all of these students need. And there's mental health, and there's their wellness, and there's their, you know, you have such a big plate. And I said this last time I was here, I commend you all for dealing with it. I think that our students are dealing with the climate in a very intense and sometimes quiet way. I don't think they speak about it all the time, just as our adults don't do it all the time. We can't. It's too hard. And yet we see what's going on in Florida and around the world. So I just feel like, in particular, the Boardwalk School really represents the best of Acton, and that we really implemented all of this climate change nightmare into a school so that kids can go, oh my gosh, this is our future. And I want to see that in every way possible. And so when you're coming up with what is it that creates a healthy student, I really believe that helping them deal with the realities of our world and the future is part of that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Peterson. Thank you. John Peterson, 6 Jackson Drive. Last night, I reviewed some of the MCAS practice test questions. Among the grade 10 questions was rearrange the equation PV equals nRT to solve for T. Boyle's gas law for those who haven't cracked a chemistry book recently. This is a solid question. It was a good question when I took high school chemistry in 1969, and it is a good question today. The MCAS is a decent test. In the same sense that a financial audit does not review every transaction, the MCAS attempts to sample a student's knowledge and understanding Importantly, it serves as a standard that is useful in comparing school districts relative to each other and to allow each district to monitor its performance over time. This is a critical activity for each school administration and school committee. At the state level, it is a critical activity for our legislature and, of course, the Department of Education. Relative to individual students, MCAS is not central to their education. MCAS does assist in assuring that all Massachusetts high school graduates meet a common standard. The Executive Committee of the Massachusetts Association of Superintendents recommends a no vote on question 2. Why? They noted it does not reduce or eliminate MCAS testing at any grade level. It does not change the use of MCAS exams in the state accountability system. And it does not stipulate an alternative statewide standard for high school graduation. The Teachers Association, however, recommends a yes vote on question 2. Why? The MTA asserts that question 2 will provide a replacement. That is true in the sense that if I borrow your bottle of milk, take out a glass and return it, I have replaced your bottle of milk. Question 2 is reducing the requirements for graduation and returning us to a system where each district independently determines the requirements for graduation. This is comparable to each school in the DCL deciding whether or not it wants a standard 400-meter track or a 350-meter track or some other length of track. Races run on tracks of different lengths are difficult to compare. The MTA asserts that MCAS is not a standard. The MCAS is a standard. It's just a standard that the MTA does not like. MCAS can and should force difficult decisions about accountability, whether that is at the level of a school district or an individual school or a school classroom. Rather than working to diminish the MCAS test, the MTA should support ongoing efforts to improve MCAS and develop better aggregate assessments of performance. This is critical to supporting our students. Question 2 is a Trojan horse. Vote no.
Thank you, John.
Good evening. Xuan Kong, Putnam Road. Unlike Dr. Peterson before me, I did very little preparation for this. It was half page, but since he have said pretty much what I prepared to say, I'm just going to say one thing. This is also in regard to question 2 that will be on the ballot. One of the postcards received says, our kids are more than a number. I assume that number refers to MCAS test scores that are required for graduation. To me, I think that statement itself makes sense, but my interpretation perhaps is a bit different. To me, that number should be what we expect from our kids not to earn the minimum so that they can pass MCAS as a graduation requirement with that number, but also to learn much more beyond that simple number, to prepare them for success beyond high school. In short, MCAS is critical and necessary mile marker we have today to measure the readiness of our students for success. And it should only be replaced until a better standard can be developed and adopted, which is not the case today. So I urge you all vote no on question number 2.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Step up to the mic.
Hi, I'm Glenn Cody. I live on Strawberry Hill Road. I wasn't going to say anything, but I just want to be brief. High-stakes testing is stupid. Teaching to test is stupid. I didn't do too well in high school. I turned out just fine. I graduated with honors at UMass Lowell with a bachelor's in computer science. I didn't need the MCAS to get the support I needed. There are better ways to help our kids learn the best than MCAS. It's stupid, it should go. Yes on 2, thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. All right, we are going to move on now to the superintendent's update. Peter.
All right, thank you, Adam. So I'm excited to announce that Acton-Boxborough Regional School District was just named a 2024 Mass Save Climate Leader. So this is a distinguished recognition that honors 19 entities across Massachusetts for their ongoing efforts to curb energy reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and guide the Commonwealth to a net zero future. I will say we are the only school district on the 2024 list. The climate leaders represent a range of industries and sectors, including museums, grocery, education, healthcare, hospitality, municipalities, and more. Each honoree has shown a deep commitment to addressing the climate crisis by taking significant measures toward a sustainable future through energy-efficient upgrades. So we're very pleased to be able to announce that. I also just want to do some congratulations. We had 10 of our high school students who are current 12th graders that were awarded the honor of being named National Merit semifinalists. That's absolutely fantastic for high school. We also had 54 of our students who were commended scholars, which is among the top 50,000 students nationally. So congratulations to all those students at the high school. And our high school was also placed on the National AP Honor Roll for the 2023-24 school year. That honor roll recognizes schools that have done outstanding work to welcome more students into AP courses and support them on the path to college success. So the AP Honor Roll, there's really two criteria for that. One is that you maintain a greater than, I believe it's an 80% pass rate. I'm not 100% sure of that, but 100% sure of an 80% pass rate. But it's maintaining a high pass rate and expanding opportunities for more students. So we're excited about that recognition. We also are excited to share that we were awarded the Municipal Local Cybersecurity Grant. That grant allows us to adopt key cybersecurity best practices, modernize our approach to safeguarding district systems, and advance toward zero trust architecture. These improvements will significantly enhance our ability to protect student and staff data while reducing overall cyber risk across the district. We will be sending out shortly, speaking of MCAS, we will be sending out the 2024 MCAS results, and regardless of the outcome of the ballot question, we would be continuing to send those results to families every year. We have a number of holidays that we recognize during October in different events, so we'll be sending information about those home. We were fortunate that the town of Acton was downgraded from a high-risk status for EEE to a moderate risk. So we have resumed evening activities, which is consistent with typical protocols. You probably experienced that when you came in tonight and found that there was a football game at night in the dark and led to some increased traffic. So we're very excited that you were held up trying to get to the meeting. I will leave it at that for tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Any questions from Peter on the update? Okay. We are now going to move into new business. First item for new business is a new policy that's being brought forward, policy DBJ. I'm going to look over to Andrew and ask you to give us a quick update on that, if you don't mind.
Great, thanks everyone. Our policy subcommittee has started our work for this year, and one of our first items was to advance to all of you for a first read a policy that the finance department, specifically Sherry Matthews, asked us to consider. Just to give big picture, it really is more about sort of policy that codifies kind of operational actions, not necessarily proposing kind of new or novel activities, but simply reflecting kind of the procedures that really is good practice within the finance and accounting world. Really, it's about, you know, if and when within our operating budget, we identify areas where we might need to change the amount that's budgeted within a line, how that would go about, and the expectations that those changes would then be brought forward on a consistent basis, I think quarterly, by the Director of Finance, so the school committee can stay abreast of those changes and certainly ask questions if and when those are appropriate or needed by the committee. So again, it's not really, this is really sort of what I would consider kind of plumbing for our activities and for our administrative tasks, but certainly important in just terms of transparency about if and when budget transfers are made between different operating lines.
Thanks, Andrew. Liz, do you want to add anything as chair of the policy subcommittee about this, or shall we open it up for questions?
We can open it up for questions.
Anybody on the committee have questions about this policy? So typically the way policies work is that we'll see these, we'll have a first read on that, which is tonight, and then at our next meeting, we will vote this. So if you do have questions or comments beyond tonight, please do send them to myself, Peter, and we will make sure that we get those addressed before the next policy meeting and our vote. For your information, in the future, we will typically give you 2 meetings, so a month from when we propose a policy to when we vote on it, so that there's more time. But this one was sort of seen as not so consequential in terms of need for deliberation and questions. So that's why we're doing this one on a bit of a shorter timescale.
And just a comment, because we do have a meeting tomorrow morning for the policy subcommittee, but we're also meeting next week on the 18th as well, I believe.
No, we're not meeting on the 18th. We moved next week's meeting to tomorrow.
Kidding, totally kidding. But absolutely, if you have any questions, let us know.
All right, so questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will move on to vision of a graduate overview. Peter and Gabby are going to present on that from the tables over there. We're still adjusting to our new digital.
So this is something I'm actually really excited to be able to talk about with you tonight. I remember when I came to the district in 2018. I went through a pretty comprehensive entry process, had an opportunity to meet with quite a few individuals in the community, schools, faculty, staff, and I think one of the things from that original entry process that I came away from was that we had just made a significant number of changes in the district to look at wellness, student stress, and thinking about equity and what that meant for our students. And so we had just changed start times. The school committee adopted a homework policy that shifted things. We had eliminated a math skip test at the junior high school level. And all of these carried a lot of community consternation and similarly some excitement in the community as well from other individuals. And what struck me coming out of it was there had been changes made that didn't necessarily have a cohesive vision for what we wanted for students, but were trying to address really pressing and urgent issues that members of the committee and the community saw for our students at the time. But what struck me was we hadn't really articulated what we wanted in a big picture comprehensive sense. And so this is something that through the entry process I've wanted to do for a while. We would have done this actually first in my entry process, except that right after I started the entry planning process, we had a pandemic. And coming out of that, we had some different student needs that were coming our way, and we ended up prioritizing looking at a tiered system of supports to try and address some of the learning gaps that we were seeing coming out of the pandemic. So we delayed this process, but it certainly didn't fall off the radar, and we're excited to be able to launch this because at the heart of this idea of developing a vision of a graduate is the notion that you are inviting your community in to help co-create a positive sense of what you want your schools to be able to do for your students. And so I'm going to start off by just playing a short video that's a little bit of an introduction. It is extremely high level, but just to kind of tee it up a little, and then we'll talk in more depth as we go. I'm going to apologize. Gabby and I actually worked on all of this together. I'm going to talk tonight because Gabby and I haven't really seen each other outside of formal meetings with other people in like 2 or 3 days. So I will do most of the talking, but Gabby's going to jump in on the Q&A and everything else. It's not her fault. It's just a function of, unfortunately, we thought we had time and got pulled in different directions.
There's some research out there that said 85% of the jobs that will be available in 2030 do not exist today. So what does that look like? How do we prepare students for jobs that do not exist today?
All of that begins with a hope for what are the aspirations we have for our school system and for our students.
What I want from a portrait graduate is to bring our community in, because they're an essential part of the journey.
Bringing our community inside the schools and having what we're doing with Portrait of a Graduate with our attributes go into our businesses, go into our homes.
It's going to just keep us really focused as an entire community on our North Star for our students.
We don't have time to waste. Their lives are at stake.
We need to build better communicators, better collaborators. We need our students to be creative. We need them to be able to critically think and problem solve. And we need them to be good people, be good citizens.
My advice to any leader that's looking at it is you just got to get started.
So we are not using Battelle for Kids. We're going to actually do this in-house ourselves. But I want to talk a little bit about what a portrait of a graduate is. And it's essentially a combination of the knowledge that we want students to have and an understanding that, our core academic subjects and all of our elective offerings are still critically important to building a solid knowledge base in our students. But then the portrait of a graduate goes beyond that too, to actually articulate types of skills that we want our students to develop while they're moving through our school district, as well as habits of mind. Things like resilience, problem-solving ability, decision-making attributes, because those are all equally important as students progress through the school system and off into, post-secondary opportunities that they might have. And the idea that developing a vision of a graduate is really about creating an aspiration for the school district. We know that there's no singular vision for what every student should have, but we do know that there are some really critical essential skills that we think students should be developing while they pass through our schools. So I think, too, the notion of developing this vision of a graduate allows us to actually come together as a community and articulate in a cohesive way what we are working toward for our students. And so that as we then think about developing programs, aligning curricula, we're thinking about what our community said it valued for our students in our school system. And I think it also allows us to really stay focused on a community aspiration and less on any kind of individual initiatives and pushes that might come along that might be very well-intentioned, but might not be kind of that core mission of what we're trying to accomplish as a school district. So this really, once you adopt it, it becomes that guiding light for what you're trying to do over the next several years to work toward with your schools and students. The World Economic Forum, regularly publishes kind of a future of jobs report, and they really look at surveying vast numbers of employers for the types of skills that they're looking for. And so I think oftentimes when we think of and what stands out to me, kind of social emotional learning, a lot of people think of those as kind of soft skills. Why are schools focused on that? Are those really what we need? And this one's a little harder to see, but and I apologize because I pulled it right off of some slides with this, but critical thinking is the top skill, analytical thinking, and if I go to the next slide of growing skills, it's a little bit easier to read. Reading, writing, and mathematics are absolutely still among the top skills that employers were looking for, but they're number 16 on this list of top skills that employers are really looking for, and they believe our students who are in our schools today, even in kindergarten, are going to need when they graduate. And so, we think of creativity, resilience, flexibility. Those are actually job skills. They're not just SEL skills that we're teaching our students. And I think to be able to think about that as a whole community and reflect on the importance of why we're taking a broad approach to student achievement is going to be really important. So we're thinking of some different stakeholders that we want to make sure are engaged in this process. Students are absolutely primary to engage in this. Current and former students have really interesting and important perspectives to be able to share about where they see the future of education leading and what they think they're going to need to develop throughout their lives. Our families who have students, this is an opportunity for families to provide their aspirations for what they want to see out of our school district. Educators have a lens of having seen thousands and thousands of students and that notion of the professional approach to what
we want to develop in our students, community members who are part of civic organizations in the community, other stakeholders can really provide a lot of valuable input into this. And we also want to make sure that we're reaching out to our business leaders in the community to engage them in thinking about the top skills that they're looking for in students who have graduated and come through our district. So we're going to just talk at a high level about the engagement process, and we will be updating you as we go through the school year here. We have a steering committee that is some students, educators, leaders, school committee members who are actually working to help guide this process. And one of the first things that we're going to be doing in early November is launching a series of surveys. And we're using an engagement tool where members of the community, our students, staff, families, community, business leaders, all have an opportunity to go in and provide input into the types of knowledge, skills, and habits of mind that they think students should be developing, and then actually in a second round go back in and rate those as either critically important or maybe less important, so that we can really see what comes to the top. We then want to actually host a visioning workshop in January that brings probably about 100 members of the community together to go deeper and actually do some real learning around what a vision of a graduate is, what the top skills workplaces are looking for, review the community survey data that we had, and actually help us prioritize some of the knowledge, skills, and habits of mind that we want to include in that vision. That vision will then inform a draft that we will vet again with the community and gain more community input before eventually coming to you with a final version of a draft that we would ask you to adopt as the vision of a graduate for our school district. So overall timeline, we're looking at launching surveys in November. That will happen probably in 2 rounds because you need people to do the brainstorming first and then go back in and rate the ideas that were brainstormed. In January, we're going to be hosting our workshop that goes deeper with a broad range of community members. We will then work probably in around February to actually draft a first version of this vision of a graduate. We will send that out for more feedback as we go into early spring, and then work to revise that and eventually bring it forward to you probably in late May so that we could have that voted before the end of this school year. That doesn't end the work that we need to do, and actually maybe Gabby, you can talk because that's where the handoff to our teaching and learning team becomes the heaviest. So I don't know if you want to talk to this.
Yeah, sure. Nice job, Peter. Thank you. This is a really exciting process, not just because of the opportunity to look at aspirations and potential, but also as another reflective point for our practitioners to really think about the implications of these decisions that we make around those vision comprehensive competencies. How does this now impact our practice and the way in which we engage with our students in classrooms and in all of our wraparound services, including athletics and extracurricular events, which is incredibly important. So once that decision is made, once the vision is finalized, it'll be incredibly important for us to articulate that and share that broadly with the community, and then start that really important teaching and learning work around how does this impact us as professionals? How is this now going to help us to really think about cultivating those competencies in very intentional ways? The frameworks, every single comprehensive framework for Massachusetts has changed since 2016. And I will say DESE has done a much better job of layering on standards of practice, which we think about as competencies over content standards. So we're developing skills. The frameworks do a much better job than they previously did of really intentionalizing the development of skills. And we all know that in work, we're often faced with unique challenges that we have to bring to that work, skills that we might not be able to, that we need to access for unknown experiences. And that's the work that we need to do in our curriculum work, which will happen through professional development. And then we'll really need to figure out how are we going to monitor the development of those competencies and really understand how those competencies are developing in our kiddos from very, very littles up through really that graduation stage.
I'll just talk to the last one, this idea of progress monitoring. As a piece of this, one of the things that we need to be able to develop as a district is kind of a data collection system to understand how we're actually helping students develop the various skills, knowledge, and habits of mind that we we've articulated. And so I actually think this is a very appropriate conversation, given some of the early public comment around MCAS. You know, this idea that students need to have strong content knowledge does not go away. I want to be clear about that. That is not the intention of a vision, but it's to actually broaden the lens of what we also consider important beyond content knowledge. And I think one of the challenges of how education is developed is we have not had good metrics beyond just standardized testing in order to be able to understand how our students grow. And I think this pushes us in that direction to think broadly about what student achievement looks like. And I think there's an opportunity, especially within our community, that rightfully is very interested in understanding how our students do and making sure that our students do well, to be able to articulate on a spectrum how our kids are faring. So I think this is a real opportunity for us to expand the dialogue around what achievement looks like in our community, which I think is a very healthy and welcome thing. Want to make sure you know it doesn't mean that content is less important. It just means that there are other things that are important as well. So happy to take any thoughts, questions as we.
Lakshmi.
So I was wondering, I mean, it's very abstract for people who are not in the field of education, right? So I was wondering, could you give an example? It can be very hypothetical, and walk us through from where you start to where it ends in working with the students, and what it would lead to, and how.
Sure.
Thanks.
One example of something that comes up quite often in different districts' vision of a graduate. It doesn't mean it will be our top, but quite often it's the ability to think critically, analyze, and solve problems. And so one of the things that you do when you have articulated that that's a top skill, you then look at your curriculum from pre-K all the way through grade 12, and you actually look at and ensure that students have ample opportunities every year along that course to actually practice critical thinking and problem solving, and that they're progressing through. What that also means is you have to then break that down into what does critical thinking look like for a pre-K student, and be able to clearly articulate that. What does that look like for a fourth grader, an eighth grader, and a junior in high school, so that as they progress through the system, you're actually providing explicit instruction for how to develop critical thinking skills, but you're also giving students opportunities to practice that skill and then eventually, you know, be able to measure how students are growing. Did that?
Hi. I feel like these are a little sensitive tonight. I don't think it's just me. I really like this presentation for various reasons. I think it's interesting how it kind of marries not like a corporatization, but a sort of like leveling of everything with the idea that we are broadening and we are making this more about the individual student. Looking at the top skills here, customer service comes up pretty high on the list. As a customer service person who's done that for my whole career, I have to echo what one of our speakers said about MCAS. I did not do well on the MCAS. I did not like the MCAS. I didn't find it valuable, and yet I think I'm a successful person. So, you know, my question is sort of, what does success mean? And I think that this whole conversation is so important, and it's been a long time coming. I think a lot of us can look back at some of the kids that maybe didn't love school, didn't do so well, weren't super engaged, and how they thrived after high school. So I'm really happy to see this, you know, broadening. It's really exciting.
I'll just add a comment. One of the things I thought about as we were planning this to launch it this year, I happened to attend some workshops on artificial intelligence and kind of the future of education and what the impact of artificial intelligence would have on how we deliver in education, what some of the concerns were around AI, and how this was going to impact jobs. And it actually made me really grateful that we're starting this process now and not 5 years ago, because I actually think if we had started this process 5 years ago, we would probably have to rethink it all. Because I think, you know, AI is having such a profound impact on the future of jobs and the types of skills that students are going to have, that it's a really great opportunity right now to be thinking forward around how we want to develop our students and how our schools are going to need to shift in terms of the education that we provide kids, because the world is shifting in seismic ways under our feet, whether we know it or not. You know, I think we're probably all using some form of AI tool. We probably have for about 10 years. I think generative AI is maybe the newest platform of AI, but machine learning is not new. And we have been using it in all of our lives for years now. If you have Amazon Alexa, Siri, you know, all these things, these are machine learning tools. And we're just seeing kind of the next groundbreaking generation where machines are able to now pick up knowledge and skills on their own. And there is a real shift in how the job market is going to be impacted by that. I heard that for a period of time, a lot of the major tech companies actually stopped hiring software engineers because there was a real thinking that with generative AI and its ability to code itself, that one software engineer could probably produce now between 6 and 10 former software engineers would be able to do. And so, you know, as someone whose son is headed into the math and computer science fields, I was paying really close attention to what his future might look like, and he's thought a lot about what that's going to mean for what he has to do. And quite honestly, for him, it actually meant that he decided to prioritize math over the computer science major, because he thought it had broader implications for data science and the ability to interpret data, think more broadly about some of the skills. So, you know, even as a parent, I'm really seeing the need to have a clearly articulated vision for what our kids need to do beyond just the traditional academic course.
Yeah. If I may add as well, it's so important that we're talking about jobs for the future and thinking about this. And what I often think about, I think in partnership with all of you, is that we're preparing kiddos for college, career, and life. And so this notion of a vision for a graduate is equally preparing them to be successful contributors and have successful occupations that they're incredibly passionate about and contributing to a greater world, but also as citizens and as good humans and as individuals who are going to do a better job than we've been able to do, right? That's what we hope in repairing the brokenness of pieces of this world. And so I think that's some of the things that I also hold on to, is that how can we also use this to help pave the pathway to humanity and really, you know, good humans who are going to contribute to a brighter future as well, outside of the workplace too.
Yenshin, then Vikram.
Thank you for the presentation. I apologize for missing the meeting on Tuesday. I was being assessed by U.S. Soccer Federation. Can't get away from assessment today. I have a question, because looking at the last couple of slides, I'm seeing a lot of work has to be done by the educators. And coming out of a very difficult budget cycle last year, I'm very mindful of the impact that a new budget cycle will have on this work. I know last year we had to push away everything else just to focus on budget. This year, hopefully we're in a better place. Are we thinking about that? And, you know, because I know there's the elementary school budget task force, now there's a vision of graduates. It seems concurrent. Are we being mindful of the money?
So, yes, I think, you know, what's going to be really important for us to keep in mind is, you know, budget cycles come and go, and they can be incredibly challenging and have to be managed. And it's incredibly painful to go through challenging cycles. And yet at the same time, we can't say that because a budget's challenging, we're going to stop improving our schools for our students, and we don't want to stop thinking about what's next for our kids. What the impact that the budget does have is that we have to think about how that plan then unfolds in future years and the capacity in any given year to make different types of progress. You know, this idea of, you know, critical thinking, it doesn't mean that we're scrapping all of our curriculum to insert critical thinking. Quite honestly, most of our curriculum has critical thinking opportunities, but what's really important is for students to understand how they progress through the years, how critical thinking plays an important role in what they're developing, because the ability for students to articulate what they're learning and the importance of what they're learning is actually a significant predictor of strong outcomes for them. And so, you know, we just want to think about being intentional aligning the work that we do, making sure that, as we start to look at our curriculum, we are able to recognize where we already do things, but where we might have some gaps that have to be filled in. So I don't think what we're looking at is that everything needs to be rethought. I think what we're looking at is we want to be able to clearly articulate what we want and then do an inventory of how we're already getting there, but what opportunities may be missing that we need to be able to fill in for our kids.
Frankly, I think this is one of the most exciting things that I've seen in the school committee, and just frankly, I'm really glad to be here, that this is something that's going on. I'm just absolutely thrilled about this. I think we're already working on the knowledge part. I think that's what we already do. The habits of mind, I think we have a pretty good handle on already. Of course, there's room for improvement. I mean, we're going to assess what we're doing currently, but it's really the skill set going forward, right? It seems to be these other skill sets outside of like the core things that we typically think about. I just think it's absolutely fantastic because I think our school district is so strong and so good as it is, where this is sort of like we're growing to this, to meet the challenges of, of the next century and beyond. I'm just absolutely thrilled about all of it.
I'll second what Vikram said. A wondering I have, because measuring skills and competencies is challenging and it's hard. You can't put a percentage on that necessarily, and you can't put a letter grade on that. It's not, I'm thinking about the way progress reports come, and I'm wondering if we, and not to answer right now, but just things out there, do we have a school information system that supports a competency-based method, and then how does that then maybe provide some tools for our educators so that this is not painful? You're nodding, we're good, never mind.
I have two. One's a comment, one's a question. The first is a comment that I think plays a bit off of what Yanshin said, which is what I'm hearing us sort of go towards is that we're going to have to develop the evolution or new programs to meet this vision, and that we're going to need to put progress monitoring in place. And so, still traumatized from last year, I'm seeing dollar signs come up from those. And so the comment is, let's make sure that we clearly communicate what those are, and then there are going to have to be things that we stop doing that are not in the top 24 things that were listed on that, very important list of things that students need to leave with. And let's make sure that we clearly communicate we're picking something instead of something else because we believe this one to be more important. I do not want us to be adding more and more and more. We don't have the budget, nor do we have the capacity in our staff to manage that. And then the question is really just for you, Peter, to close the loop. On the agenda here, it says this ties into Goal 3. Can you talk a little bit about that so that we can remind our committee as well that we are doing work towards our overall goals for the year?
Sure. If you remember, we had 3 goals for the year. The first was around social emotional learning, mental health and wellness. The second was around really looking hard at our academic outcomes for students. The third was around engaging our community in some strategic visioning. And we had a number of areas that we were looking at. One we recently launched, which was the elementary budget task force. We needed to bring community members in to help co-produce some solutions to a pressing problem around resource allocation and making sure that we're using the community's resources really wisely and effectively to best balance the needs of our students, our educators, and our taxpayers. The second area that we have not talked about yet was to really review our multilingual programming for students. You saw some of the early outcomes in the first goals presentation I gave that's showing some real gaps for students as they enter our district, and it is our fastest growing population of students. And we're seeing some real shifts, particularly around the number of students who are entering our schools at WIDA levels 1 and 2, which is the absolute most foundational levels of learning how to speak English, where about 50% of our newcomers are actually coming in at WIDA levels 1 and 2. So that's presenting an emerging challenge that we need to look at. So Gabby has been working with Mary Ann Young, our multilingual education coordinator, to plan an engagement process for some of our families and staff to come together and do some visioning around that programming. And then the third tier of that third goal was this vision of a graduate work that we want to do, which is really being able to take a step back and think big picture around the outcomes that we want for students. I actually think that probably coming out of this you know, this is my 7th year here. It's just about time to renew a strategic plan for the district and think about what those next 5 to 7 years are going to entail. I wanted to get this done first so that as we think about a strategic plan, the strategic plan is actually a thoughtful approach to how we want to help achieve the outcomes that we said we wanted for our kids. So this is kind of maybe a precursor to actually launching a refresh of a strategic plan. So that's how all of these goals fit together.
Thank you. Any last questions? Leela?
I just wanted to add quickly that I think I lived through AB as a student as it was shifting from kind of this academic success focus to more of a whole student success. And I think also going through the pandemic, no, not the pandemic, the override, both traumatizing, taught us that so many people don't understand what our schools are doing or what education looks like right now. I'm thinking about, in particular, folks who are like, what is SEL? Why are kids learning it in schools? And so I'm hoping this is an opportunity to tie some of these pieces together to help folks understand what schools look like and why these pieces are so important. And if we say that we want students who are resilient and critical thinkers, like how SEL directly ties to those things. And so I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I would second that. I think, you know, I've heard that a good amount in the community of why are we spending money on SEL? You know, if you can go through the list of the top, 28 or 30 skills that employers are looking for, and at least a third of them actually would qualify as social emotional learning skills in the CASEL framework, we would actually be doing a massive disservice to our students by ill preparing them for their future, not even as good people, but as workers in a workforce, if we're not actually teaching these skills. They are thought of as soft skills, but if it's actually the top thing employers look for, how soft is that really? So I think it's pretty critically important we do this work.
I kind of just feel like I have to mention that the term soft skills feels misogynistic, that these are usually feminine coded jobs, nursing, caretaking, things like that.
All right. Thank you, Peter and Gabby. Next item on our agenda is a visit from our legislative delegation. I'm going to turn it over to Ginny or Leela for an introduction there as our legislative liaisons. And I'll invite the senator and reps to come forward. Please have a seat at the table here.
Good evening. Thank you guys for coming tonight. Why are you laughing? Okay. Okay. Sorry. It's great to have you guys all here, and we just wanted to provide a forum for us to hear from you and you guys to hear from us. I think that, somewhere in the middle of last year, we realized that the committee as a whole would like to have a closer relationship with you so that we can provide you feedback on our needs. Obviously, we were in a very big budget crisis last year, and you guys are the ones who bring home a lot of the money. So we were hoping to listen to what you guys have been working on in terms of pre-K to 12th grade education and any priorities that you have, and also understanding where you see the next legislative cycle in terms of public education funding. And then with that, we'd like to just talk about our local needs and priorities, which you guys, I think all know about. But with that, I don't know if there was an order but in any order, if you guys could just talk about that.
Senator Eldridge, welcome. I'm glad you all could make it in time. Peter and I were looking to vamp to stretch out time so that you could all get here. So great to have you here.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us. And yeah, definitely would like to make this annual event. I think pre-COVID, it was sort of an annual event, and then we kind of got off track a little bit during the pandemic. But thank you so much for having us. And yeah, I'll just give a brief update, and I know there'll be questions from from members as well. But as far as where things are at now, on the budget front, not much has changed in the sense that we did pass a budget. Governor Healy, signed the budget several months ago. So as you know, there was a modest increase, especially for school districts like Acton-Boxborough, with basically the formula of the Student Opportunity Act, and the fact that our revenues were a bit behind this year. So what you saw in the budget for pretty much all categories was a modest increase. So that's everything from Chapter 70, minimum aid, regional school transportation, special education, circuit breaker. I know those are generally the areas that best support Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. So that is that's sort of what was reflected in the budget. I know that representing 12 communities, I've heard from other minimum aid communities that there was recently a meeting, I think, of all minimum aid school districts. So I don't know if is that correct? Did that happen recently, or?
Yeah, this past Tuesday, the Mass Association of Regional Schools held an update on the 211 communities that are in hold harmless or in minimum aid.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you had that meeting. I did talk to Senator Lewis, the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Education. So, he made the point that the Foundation Budget Review Commission, it's the last time it met was 10 years ago. So is it time to bring back the Foundation Budget Review Commission to talk about changing the formula? Before, actually, when I was a state rep, I was involved, I think it was with Marita Altieri, when she was on the school committee, led the effort for the, I think it's 17.5% guarantee for all communities, the minimum aid. So that was the last reform that, particularly helped suburban districts. So that's certainly, I'm not certain, I don't think there's consensus yet in the legislature on that, but I do think it'd be good to bring back the Foundation Budget Review Commission, as well as, what all the minimum aid communities feel as far as making a difference. So certainly support that. And I won't go into too much detail, but I on the early education front, and appreciate your enthusiasm and passion for that. I know I've talked to Ginny Kremer a lot about this, is that while the full early education bill did not become law this session, there was some really good collaboration between the House and Senate in the budget to make some progress on early education. It was, to be clear, mostly focused on serving those who are less well off, but there were some changes in the budget, some policy changes, some sort of directives, if you will, to the Department of Education and Secondary Education, DESE. So there were some changes in the budget. And then I would just say from my, interacting with constituents in general, continue to hear about what are the communities doing, what is the state doing, what is the school district doing on mental health issues and supporting children. And I know, thank Peter for his great work and the staff on providing, more direct connections to psychologists and counselors for children who have mental health challenges. I would agree the state should do more, and I don't know if that's, a dedicated money to every school district to better support mental health, or, what individual members feel would be most helpful, but certainly I continue to hear about that just from general constituents. So, so that was sort of my brief update, and looking forward to the conversation on local issues and state issues tonight, and thanks very much for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Eldridge. Rep. Sena.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight. I echo that this is great to see if we can at least meet yearly. On the education standpoint, on the pre-K, I certainly been advocating for universal pre-K, and I know we're years away from that, but that has been my goal at the legislature, so we can, and I know we have provider issues, we have staffing issues, and we have, I think we have to deal with all that if that really becomes a reality, we have to deal with all the outcomes of that piece of legislature. But I actually been really pushing for, all-day kindergarten. Really, I know I've been working since the Baker administration to try to get those grants back that was, at some point was existed and now it's no longer there. I echo what Senator Eldridge said with, not only with the pre-K, but mental health. I do have a bill that would increase maybe 2 or 3 more hours a yearly for trainings for the teachers, just to make sure that, we're addressing mental health in a way to support the students so that they can get help when they feel like they need help. And I know we're doing some work on that, but I think we could do a lot more. And the other couple bills that I have on education is an act to promote high-quality comprehensive literacy instruction. And I know that has had lots of discussions at the hearing, and looking forward to kind of maintain that momentum. And lastly, on those are the 3 pieces of education that I've been kind of working on. But one area that I would like to see us work together is on the AP courses that we have at the high school. How can we get more diverse students in those courses and make sure that we are making it equal, right, when it comes to the education standpoint? Because the gap, I know that we have, inequality issues, but certainly impacts Latinx, Asians. Well, Asians tend to be doing higher up with white students, but Latino and Black students become, disadvantaged, disenfranchised almost. So that's an area that I would like to work with you, and I know that's something maybe requires state funding, but I think it's an area that we need to address now, so that way we're not increasing that gap and we're trying to minimize it. So that's an area of concern. I went to Acton-Boxborough, I'm a proud graduate of Middlesex Community College, and then UMass Amherst, so I certainly understand the struggles that many students and even English learners face. So if we can address that, thank you.
Thanks, Rep. Sena. Rep. Cataldo. And I'll ask the other 2 of you to turn your mics off or we're going to get some bad feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for inviting us. Thanks for being here and doing this job. It's not easy. You're missing the Northern Lights. I don't know if you know that right now. But I'm sure some people are going to send you photographs like they did me. By the way, I went out and ran out to check, and you cannot see the Northern Lights from here. So, but I really, really appreciate you. They don't pay you enough. I know, somebody earlier during the public comment period mentioned the superintendent's salary. They don't pay you enough either, Peter. But you're all doing a great job, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. I have a little PowerPoint here, and hopefully this is both non-redundant to what my colleagues have said and also very responsive to the helpful prompts that Leela sent out earlier. So thanks, Leela, for that. So just some numbers behind what Senator Eldridge accurately summarized earlier. We saw a bigger increase for fiscal year 25 than we did in the previous years, and for local aid, Chapter 70 local aid for Acton-Boxborough. That was largely because of a historic increase in Chapter 70 aid to minimum aid communities, and I think the reason for that was effective advocacy from the minimum aid communities and hopefully also from the legislative delegation, and I'd like to see that continue, and I'm hopeful that we will make strides in that, because in my view, it's not enough yet. We did fully fund the special education circuit breaker. I know from the Superintendents Association and others, that is a major strain on the fiscal health of the school district. That's at fully funding means at 75%. I'll get into this in a second, but there is a legislative proposal that I support that was filed last session from my colleague in Fitchburg, will be filed again this session to increase that to 90%. I know that's something that the Superintendents Association has been strongly advocating for, and I'd like to see that happen. Part of the issue with out-of-district funding right now is that the costs that out-of-district schools are charging the school districts per student are far higher than any types of increases we're seeing that you're getting in the school district from either property taxes or the state. I think there's an equity and a fairness issue there in terms of how much the state is agreeing to pay those out-of-district schools per student. I don't doubt their costs are real and rising, especially in a pandemic era, but what I do question is whether it makes sense for the school district to be on the hook for that rate of increase when students who are in district are not getting a similar rate of increase. So that's something that's being discussed. And as I'm sure you all know, we took a major step forward with funding universal free school meals. And this goes for anything that I mentioned, but including this is a good example. I'd love to know and have feedback from you on how that is going. In terms of, for example, I've heard in some communities in the district I represent that there are lines, that there have been some kind of bureaucratic issues that are state imposed that maybe could be loosened up to make that program more practical, and also the quality of food and the healthiness of the food and how everyone is feeling about that. Because I think universal school meals was a great, historic, amazing step forward, but we need to continue to focus on student health. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. AB has done a really good job writing grants to the state for money. In each of these categories, $140,000 so far this fiscal year. Hopefully that number will go up. And I, love getting requests to write letters of support. When we know that you're writing a grant, we do everything we can to support that. When we know of grant opportunities, we try to communicate those, and we'll continue to do that. So thanks to the admin for working on those with us. Rep. Sena mentioned literacy education. I just want to be on the record now. I fully support that bill. That is a controversial bill. To me, it's an abomination that many school districts around the state have been teaching debunked methods of literacy for years when we knew, and that needs to change. So I know there's opposition to that bill. I think Rep. Sena is going to file it again, and I'm going to support it because we need to be doing much better on that issue. And, I think there was some commentary about question 2. I really like the way that Leela phrased the question that she posed to us, which is, what's going to happen next? Because I think whether it passes, if it does pass, we'll have nothing and we'll be starting from zero. But I think that there is consensus that we do need some sort of statewide standard for graduation in Massachusetts. That was part of the grand bargain in 1993. And that's going to have to be part of the solution. That doesn't mean that MCAS is perfect. So if we get rid of MCAS as a graduation requirement, there is still going to be, and have been, and leading up to the ballot question decision, there already were conversations about how can we improve a statewide graduation requirement. So I think regardless of how that turns out, that discussion is going to continue and should continue. I mentioned the bill increasing the circuit breaker percentage, and I have filed a bill, which we've talked about tuition-free universal full-day kindergarten, which would obviously have a profound effect on Acton, and I think the state should be supporting. Just wanted to let you know of 2 appointments that have relevance to the school system. Last week, I was appointed by the House Speaker as co-chair of the state's first commission to combat anti-Semitism. Want to shout out this school district for holding a meeting at Congregation Beth Elohim last year to hear from family members and students who had experienced anti-Semitism in the Acton community and on school grounds. The superintendent came, principal from R.J. Gray came, a leader from the superintendent's light staff came, and I think that was really important and honest conversation, and that happened before October 7th. The statement that you saw from Superintendent Light was, in my mind, just speaking for myself, the best statement from any academic leader at any level of education that I had read, and I had read a lot of them. And I think that the reason it was so good was that he had so many conversations with the diverse stakeholders in the community before deciding to write something. So I really appreciated that. And I know that part of that commission's work is going to be very difficult, and it's going to involve K through 12 education, because that is something we're seeing that. We're just seeing it too much in our schools, and it's very concerning. It's very concerning. I was also appointed by the Speaker as the House member on the Restorative Justice Advisory Committee. That happened almost exactly a year ago, and I've been working on that. And restorative justice, for those who aren't familiar, is a victim-centered approach that is advocated for by many criminal justice advocates and people in that space. And there's been a lot of buy-in. The chief of police in Acton came to the State House along with the chief of police from Concord and many other law enforcement leaders, formerly incarcerated people, to advocate for more state support for restorative justice, which does not just operate in the prison system or after the prison system. It actually operates in our public schools as well as a method of conflict resolution. I'll be filing a bill that I expect will have the support of the commission in January 2025, and we're working through that. This is one, just wanted to make a note of it for feedback on athletics, a major statewide equity issue, health issue, both in terms of offerings. Offerings in Acton are phenomenal, but also in terms of accessibility within districts, even wealthier districts that have a lot of offerings. And the more we learn about health and science, the more we know that that availability of that has very profound and long-term health effects, as does, of course, school nutrition. So thanks so much for listening to me. My contact information is there. I think most of you already have it, but really excited to be working with you for the rest of this year and hopefully another 2. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do something a little different this time. Typically, I leave it to my committee to ask questions and make comments, but I'm going to go first this time. Took some notes, and I wanted to give you all some feedback first. Hopefully, I'm going to echo some of the comments of my committee members, but then we'll turn it over to them as well. First of all, I do want to say thank you to all of you for the support on the minimum aid. It is a great help. Every little bit helps. But I want to put some things in perspective for you. So, Rep. Cataldo, you showed a great slide there. $16 million is what Acton and Boxborough got for our state aid for our school budget. Our school budget this year was $114 million. The $104 additional dollars that we got per student in state minimum aid is about $300,000. So while we will take every dollar that we can get from you, what we're getting from the state is very small in comparison to what we have deemed, and even what the state has deemed, is a minimum amount of spending that we should put towards our students. So I think above everything else, that for us is our biggest challenge as we continue to put forward the programs that you're talking about, that you heard a little bit about in terms of our vision of a graduate. It is the funding, and it's not just the funding, it's the burden that funding puts on our community, which also has needs. Boxborough needs a new firehouse, Acton needs a new DPW. These are competing needs, and it often pits community members against each other. So I think that's one of the biggest things that is a challenge for us. I do want to point out that our former finance director, Dave Vertolino, was one of the members of the Foundation Budget Review Committee, and he had lots of feedback on that. One of the things that I would say with regards to that is we can't wait for that to happen. We cannot wait any longer. And so one of the big talking points and one of the big things that we're advocating for is Senator Lewis's bill, that we can't wait till 2027 to start looking at the foundation budget. That has to happen now. So I would encourage you all to work on that, and also reach out to Senator Comerford, who I believe is running the regional school caucus. I think we're in an interesting place here as a fully regionalized district, both at elementary and secondary level, in what might be considered a more suburban, a more affluent community. The challenges that we have are both similar and different than what our colleagues have out in Western Massachusetts, who have maybe smaller districts. They're challenged with minimum aid, they're challenged with hold harmless in other ways, but we're all facing this funding challenge. With regards to circuit breaker, I'm gonna ask Peter for a little bit of feedback. I think it was great that it was fully funded, but I believe that in terms of last year's funding, we were not able to get the full 75%. Is that right?
Yeah, so this was really hot off the presses because you know I usually try and call you and give you these thoughts, but we just came from a meeting at the Superintendents Association, and circuit breaker was fully funded at 75%, but I believe the number that they shared, and they haven't given it to us in writing yet, so I'm speaking from memory, was that claims came in 28% higher. And so, you know, we just got revised circuit breaker estimates where we were anticipating about $4.1 million in circuit breaker reimbursement. We've revised that down to about $3.5 million. And that's, you know, significant money for us. So really, you know, if there's any way, the specific ask I would have is, I believe revenues get finalized at the state level in December. And, you know, Jamie, I know from talking to you, Millionaires Tax has done very, very well, and there's a lot of revenue sitting in that pot. If there's any opportunity to come back to circuit breaker in the current fiscal year, to think about, you know, how to better match, you know, the actuals with kind of that 75% threshold. I don't know how that works at the state level, but I think that would be a huge relief, and it certainly doesn't just impact us. It's every school district in the state is going to be challenged with that. And that affected both, you know, the regular circuit breaker and the transportation circuit breaker. I think transportation reimbursement ended up only coming in at about 44% for us once they did all the calculations. So just, you know, kind of give you that heads up of as you're thinking into December and into January, if there's any opportunity to come back to that, that would be really important.
Superintendent Light, is there some kind of database, spreadsheet, report, or something that you can share with us on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm waiting to get more information from MASS, but I will certainly, you know, get some more information off. I'll have Sherry Matthews send some information out to all three of you.
Thank you.
All right, now I want to pivot to some of the positives. So we talked a bit about literacy, and I do want to highlight that several years ago, Acton-Boxborough did make the switch to a research-based literacy program, and I think the rollout has been going quite successfully. So that's definitely something that we're on the forefront of. Rep. Cataldo, you talked a bit about both athletics and school meals. First, I want to highlight that we have an amazing unified athletics program, and so I would encourage you to come visit the unified basketball program that we've got here. A great way to provide opportunity for all students in the district to participate in athletics. And then with regards to school lunch, we have done amazing work with our free school lunch program. I would invite you to join the Instagram page of the Acton-Boxborough lunch account, where you'll see local produce, local meats, and amazing meals that are produced by our excellent food service team. And I'll make sure I finagle a way to invite you over for lunch sometime. Not only does the food service team provide great meals for our schools, but also when we have catered events here for the administration, they're providing those meals. It's absolutely wonderful what they're doing. They're doing that with the great support from the state on the free school lunches. All right, that's everything I had. I appreciate that I got to go first. I'm going to turn it over to the committee now for any other.
Adam, if I could ask again,
Yeah.
what was the numbers again, the initial numbers you gave us? How much
Sure,
you got from the state, and what was your operating budget, and how much was it from local?
Yeah, so as Rep. Cataldo shared, it was about $16.5 million was what we got in state aid. Roughly our budget for this year is $114 million. And then that $104 per student that you see there, which was the minimum aid, equates to about $300,000. As an aside, we don't get that final information about the minimum aid until after our budgets are set and voted. So as a matter of budget mechanics, that money doesn't go into what we're delivering this year. It goes into our excess and deficiency free cash, which is a reserve fund that we have depleted over the past few years. So that extra money that we get per pupil doesn't go, unfortunately, in the year that you give it to us towards any services for students. And in many cases, it becomes what we would look as one-time use funds that we then do a capital project or a consultancy work with. So that's the mechanics of the state budget timing process and all of that. Like I said, we're super grateful for the money. $300,000 we can do a lot with, but if you're not in hold harmless, you're looking at, and I looked at the numbers just today, back in 2007 was the last time we weren't in hold harmless, we received an additional $1.5 million in state aid, as opposed to the $300,000 that we got now. So it's a big deal to be in hold harmless. All right, I'm going to start over here. Tori.
Thank you all for being here. Senator Eldridge, you mentioned relooking the Chapter 70 formulas. An area of interest for us, I think, is our multilingual learners' needs. They're much higher. I don't know if you were here when Peter was addressing that, but a lot of them are coming in just at a very basic level of English. And also a lot of students that are coming in, well, I don't know if a lot is the right term to use there, but we have students coming in who have had significantly disrupted educations. And so having that need in a district that is also in the situation that we're in really just increases the services we need to be able to support, and finding the money to do that is challenging. And then...
May I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So the Student Opportunity Act, one of the key parts of the formula was ELL learners. So I'm just wondering, has there been any change due to the increase of English language learners in the Acton-Boxborough schools in terms of the formula of the Student Opportunity Act?
So we're in minimum aid status still. So,
Okay, so it
you know, until we break through hold harmless, that won't actually reap any benefit for us. So that's the challenge that we've seen.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And then my other thought for Representative Cataldo, I appreciated what you said with, and also Leela's question, the what next if question 2 passes. And one of my wonderings there is what happens for the students who may not have passed the MCAS, who suddenly have a free path to, now I've got my diploma and I'm off, but may not be aware that there are additional services that they might need through the schools, especially some of the employment preparation services. Anecdotally, I've heard that during COVID, we had students who suddenly had the opportunity to get a diploma that they didn't think they were going to get otherwise. They took it and then said, oh, well, now we would like to be part of this program, and because they've got a graduation diploma, they can't join it. And so I'm wondering, you know, as we talk about equity, one of my worries there is what about some of the students that really need access to these services? Yes, we need to have some sort of state standard. Our portrait of a graduate is going to be super helpful for us, but there's also this group out here, and there's probably a timeline between this vote and when we can get a state standard in place. What next?
I think you've correctly identified one of the important questions that's going to need to be answered through this process. And I don't have an answer for you, Tori. We have a system now. If that system changes in November, then we're going to need to figure something else out. And I don't know that anyone can predict what's going to happen in November.
Going around the table, anybody else questions? Leela?
Yeah, thank you all. I just want to clarify the helpful notes that I sent were entirely Ginny. I was just the messenger. So I appreciate it, but that all goes to Ginny. I did have a question around, I think, what Ginny kind of alluded to in the beginning, which was if you have any sense of what there is political will to do in the legislature related to education. There aren't a whole number of bills out of the 7,000 that are filed that go very many places. And so I'm curious if you have any insights into, I know we're early, but if you have any insight about what might actually move.
Sure. Well, what Peter had mentioned about the mass fair share millionaires tax is it is really overperforming. So, you know, this year, as Representative Cataldo pointed out, we were able to fund universal school meals, an issue I've been passionate about and filed a bill around a debt-free college. So now we have free community college. That was part of the benefit. Obviously, continuing to fully fund the Student Opportunity Act, but it appears that the millionaires tax will continue to overperform and probably around $2 billion a year. So I do think because of the organizing by minimum aid communities, I do think there'd be an interest to look at increasing funding for minimum aid communities. And I would say early education, because we did make some progress in the budget that was collaborative between the House and Senate. I would hope that we could pass a comprehensive early education bill, while still noting that that early education bill will mostly focus on those who are less well off, you know, because, families, yeah. Yeah, probably like 125% of the poverty level.
But that would be statewide?
Exactly. Yep. Yep, absolutely. But I know recently we visited a early education center in Acton, you know, and the reality is, you know, the vast majority of the kids that go there are you know, there's no vouchers, right? The parents are paying the full cost. So we need to do a lot better, but you're talking billions of dollars if you're really talking about universal early education, so.
So those when we visited the site, one of my critique from after that meeting was because they were receiving, asking for us to increase the grants for C3 grants, Commonwealth Cares for Children, which they can use to support staffing. But they had no child in that center with a voucher. So I had a conversation with the commissioner from early, and I brought that up, and she said, well, now we are allocating the way the formula now works, at least in other words, those grants that are going to those centers, they're increasing by the number of the children that have the most amount of vouchers. So it's in other words, it's in the percentage. So we have that we can share. Maybe we can send it out later after the meeting here, Jimmy. But basically basically incentivizing them to, you know, receive vouchers from children who have them. I know maybe we need to increase the pay or to incentivize those the rate.
Other questions, comments? We're going to go right down this way in order.
Hi. It's really great to have this opportunity to see all three of you together in this sort of format. And I did think long and hard about what I would want to say to the three of you when you're sitting here before me. And honestly, you know, knowing, like, I keep in touch with what you all are doing, you know, in your work, so I know I'm preaching to the choir, but since we've been through this override process and we're facing, you know, some of these challenges with, you know, changing demographics in the community, I guess my thinking is sort of around the funding model generally, and, you know, the gears of government grind slowly, so seeing relief can take a long time. And I think that it in some ways can sort of hamper people's ability to move to the community that they might want to live in. It sort of inflames tensions. I think it ends up with people infighting instead of being able to look and see the funding model is the problem. Fundamentally, you know, I don't think that, or I do think that it's pretty obvious that when we come together and we advocate together and we work together, things improve. I sat down with somebody from Project Bread before the free school meals program was officially adopted statewide, and I asked about, you know, food quality. And one thing that she had said was, the more people that buy into the system, the better the quality of food is, and actually the cheaper the price is, and the more everybody's on the same playing field. And I think that, you know, we also see the data with union membership. Racial discrimination and other bigotry goes down when people collectively work together. So I sort of wonder, you know, looking at the number of members in the state leadership who sort of should be on a team, echoing what Leela was sort of getting at, what is the political hunger for deep systemic change? Because a lot of the things, the anti-Semitism, the you know, the issue with housing, the issue with hospitals closing, these are all tied into the same thing. The issue is the funding model. So how deeply are people interested in change?
Thank you for that very easy question. So certainly the legislature, we passed some major bills. There's always more to improve upon is as far as, I mean, on the housing front, I think we did make some substantial strides, you know, not only with the housing bond bill, but the MBTA Communities Act, which, you know, Acton and Boxborough have implemented, and I know Concord has, and most communities in Metro West, I think almost all in my district. So, you know, I do think you'll see progress on education, both K through 12 and early education. And there's so many other areas we have to tackle. Are there specific things outside of what I just mentioned that you'd like us to focus on? I mean, racial inequity is extremely challenging to address, but I think there is a commitment from the legislature to do that. So I don't know if that's an adequate answer, but that's my sense for where things are at.
I think what I'm getting at is sort of as you're sitting down to think about tweaking the model for minimum aid, could we maybe have a subtext of how about we throw the whole thing away and start over? Because, you know, I think that a lot of times the intent is to give more money to communities that have more needs. Makes sense. But we end up hamstringing ourselves in ways and making the process really slow, and I just wonder if there's a better path forward. You know, I look at sort of the breakdown of Massachusetts state expenditures. I have a chart here comparing us to New England and the rest of the United States. Yes, we spend more on public welfare and, you know, K-12 education, but we don't actually spend that much more on K-12 education, and we actually spend less on higher education than some other parts. And so I just wonder, like, can we fix this? How, you know, hungry are people for that kind of change, or are we just looking at little tweaks?
Well, yeah. No, I mean, on public higher ed, of course, we made major investment with Free Community College and the Mass Reconnect led by Governor Healy for those who are 25 or older. So, I mean, I think that was substantial and certainly largely is one that will particularly benefit communities of color or people of color or immigrants. We just had a celebration last week at Bay Path Community College in Framingham, which was really powerful. So I think that, you know, certainly the millionaire's tax provides the revenue to provide those investments. I would say as far as the education formulas, I think you're going to see changes to the formula, but I don't think it's going to be scrapped. Yeah, that would make it take the process even longer, I would think. Yeah, so that's my assessment.
Thanks. Ginny?
Thanks. I want to just say with regard to the Foundation Budget Review Commission and, you know, reiterate what's already been said. That process took 7 years, and after they came up with their recommendations, the legislature didn't fund what they recommended funding for another 5 years. So I don't think anybody's looking for a repeat of that particular process. I really appreciate the focus on the minimum aid communities. It's absolutely of crucial importance. And also early ed, I think that, you know, more and more people are waking up to the fact that early childhood education is a very good investment. It's relatively small dollars on the front end to save a lot of money on the back end. And you know, it's a really effective way to spend public dollars. I appreciate Rep. Sena, you mentioning the all-day K. As you guys all know, we are one of a very small handful of communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, about a dozen out of 351 cities and towns, that still does not provide universal all-day kindergarten, which means that our families with 5-year-olds, many of them, are paying to send their children to public schools. And that is because there were grant programs 20 years ago where the state assisted with bridging the gap to the provision of universal all-day kindergarten. For whatever reason, when nobody sitting at this table was here, Acton-Boxborough did not take it, or Acton and Boxborough did not take advantage of those grants. And we need, for those few handful of communities, we need to have that low-hanging fruit commitment at small dollars to transition us before we are handing bills to kindergarten to families who had free K. It just doesn't make any sense. So I would really appreciate, working with the Department of Early Childhood Education and DESE or whoever. I mean, this really is a small amount of dollars in the long run for a limited period of time until those kids are all rolled into the Chapter 70. It's a couple-year gap, but we, despite our local commitment to that, that we made before the pandemic, we can't make it work. And now we're in, an increasingly perilous financial situation, given the increase in student needs. So, in mental health and pandemic. And then the last thing I want to do is just reiterate, I'm not sure any of you were here at the very beginning of our meeting when the leader of our teachers union stood up to remind everybody that we are in our third year of very serious budget cuts in Acton-Boxborough. And as we continue to be rated as one of the best school districts and high schools for whatever people, put into those ratings, we are spending well less per pupil than all of what the districts we're compared to. And our teachers are working harder for less and doing way more with less. So we're still in, in budget cut mode, even though we just passed an override. And that didn't solve our problems. So we're still in a really tough situation. So anything and everything you guys can do to help with any of the things we've talked about really is going to make a very big difference. There's just not much more that could, output that can be had from our educators and our administrators. It's been a really, really rough bunch of years. So thank you very much for being here.
Jeannie, I will say there's a bill that would try to address those, I think, 23 or 19 communities that don't have all-day kindergarten. So I have co-sponsored that bill. I mean, we've been advocating for it. There's a way that we could do it in the budget too, just put it here, address, but there's a bill that we could be, co-sponsoring as well. So, yes, hopefully. Luckily.
Enshin.
Hi, it's nice. I don't know if at this point you guys still feel it's a nice opportunity to sit here instead of just bump into us like at Acton Coffee House. Okay, Jace, not after you. Thank you for your service.
Sorry, no, it's fine. Thank you.
See what I'm dealing with? I have two comments. The first one is that I'm glad that Representative Cataldo, you brought up the athletics. The biggest challenge for giving students equal opportunity to play sports is field cost. They are astronomical at this point, which I understand in this area, real estate is really expensive. So it kind of trickles down, the clubs that charges more can afford better fields, and then the lower cost rec programs have nothing. My understanding is that when Acton had the EEE alert, the teams had to practice inside of Conan's gymnasium, which is not ideal, speaking as a soccer coach. So I don't have a solution. I'm not asking you to give me a solution or an answer today, but just something to put on your radar. The other thing that I'd like to say is that there are two Jewish members of this committee are not present today. But one of them, Andrew, will often say to a person who just received an assignment, congratulations and condolences. I'm going to give it to you, Representative Cataldo. I commend your courage to take over the co-chairship of the commission. And I also want you to let you know that it's not going to be easy. Humanity is always complicated. But please know that there are many, many members of this school community and Acton and Boxborough and the towns here. The parents, the children will appreciate everything you do. It gives them a voice. You also amplify their thought and voice of that they wish to have a safe environment for their children. I don't think that's too much to ask. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Vikram.
Last but not least, thank you all very much for being here. I think I've run into all of you at like Pfeiffer's Day and around the time a few times. I really have a problem. I mean, we're facing, again, like the third year of budget cuts, right? We're like one of the best districts, but there comes a point where you cut and you cut and you cut, and then everything just starts to fall apart. Teachers don't come here, and the property values start to tank and all these things. And it's sort of, we're in this really odd situation, and this is just statewide, right? We have Prop 2.5, right? And that makes sense. I'm a property owner. I don't want my taxes to go up that much. But at the same time, the state is mandating these really expensive things that we have to pay for. And then you don't give us the money to do it. But yet now we just, marijuana's now been legalized. There's tons of money coming in from that. Then there's the millionaire's tax. There's lots of money coming in for that. Why is this fundamental issue that's being seen by every single school district not being addressed as sort of like a critical emergency? I mean, we're a really left-leaning state, right? I mean, education is foundational to society, and so we really invest in it. And, the community college being free is a really big thing, and I know the school lunches, and there are things that are coming down. But this is a really big deal for many, many school districts, not just for ours. And I think, is there anything being done to sort of fundamentally address this huge budget issue that every single school district across the state is facing?
I mean, we inherited all this, at least we inherited this issue. All my district, all of them are complaining about the formula because they're not getting their fair share. Okay, and I understand that and I see that, but the reasoning behind the formula was to help communities that needs extra support incomes of low or gateway cities, if I may say. So it is a challenge. It is a balance we need to find, and the district I represent, I certainly want to have their interest and my interest in my district, but I certainly understand the complexity of the issue. I mean, they tried to modify the formula about 3 or 4 years ago, and now there's more issues from within that change. And it took how many years? 20 years to modify it. I appreciate your comments, so thank you.
But just one more thing is that inflation has been year over year greater than 2.5%. Michelle Wu was on Jim and Marjorie saying exactly that. For the majority of the years since Prop 2.5 passed, inflation has been greater than 2.5%. So right there, we're just, backsliding every single year upon year. And our costs are going up. I mean,
So you want to pay more than 2.5 a year?
The state has all this money coming in from marijuana and from the millionaire's tax. Give
So
the school districts money.
we had, just so we can kind of level set on this a little bit, we had serious financial constraints as a state. In fact, there were 9 seat cuts. Acton got dinged on 9 seat cuts last time because the budget projections were not correct. And so we had less money coming in than we had budgeted for. This is just basic. I know you all know this, but federal funding and state funding are very dissimilar in the sense that state funding, pretty much all of the money is going to health and human services. So within the pot of money that we have, anything that we're taking from is going to take from some other health and human services for the most part. And so it's a conversation about how we're divvying up that pot. The current formula that was mentioned before, that happened before I think most of us were here, is heavily weighted towards low-income and minority communities. I think everyone knows that, right? And so there are school committees in Dorchester and Lawrence who are meeting tonight that look a lot different than this school committee, that are also having significant budget constraints, but the state's helping them out a lot more. So as a delegation and as a delegation of minimum aid communities, we're having that discussion and they're also there. So if you're asking about the dynamics, that is the dynamic that we're talking about. And what we're advocating for, despite that, we're advocating to increase the minimum aid and to increase the pie. And we've all advocated to have a significant amount of money out of the fair share increase. Now, the fair share increased, but if you look at actual how much money we're taking in, not increasing as much as the fair share is coming in above expectations. So we're looking at, it's a whole pie question. And a very significant decision was made to dedicate a lot of that money, not to K-12 education, but to free community college. So that was a policy decision that was made, and it's not where I would have gone, but that's fine. That's what we did. And so I think next year, next fiscal year, which is happening in January in a couple months, we're renewing that conversation about how we want to apply those funds. I agree with what Senator Eldridge said earlier, which is that, and it goes to Leela's question that kicked us off, where is the political will right now? I do think that there is an increasing amount of political will for minimum aid communities, but let's just be really intellectually honest about what that means. So that's where I am. That's what I'm advocating to push us forward. I think I am the filer of the all-day kindergarten bill with my colleague Pat Kearney, and we're advocating for that. But that conversation to me is an equity conversation, and part of that conversation is explaining to our colleagues the diversity that is in a community like Acton. It's just not as apparent to them. And when they hear Acton or the other communities I represent, that's a hurdle that we have to get past. So I think part of this exercise, I think it goes to Rebecca's question too, is do you really understand what your colleagues in the legislature are dealing with? Because they represent their communities, and they are a reflection of their communities. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there, in every 2 years. So that is the question that we're dealing with. You have as much advocacy as you can possibly have from the three people at this table to increase that. But let's also just be clear about where the equities lie in terms of 161 reps, 40 senators, and a governor.
My question was to Corey. What if the MCAS question, which I fully endorsed, removing that as a requirement, but keeping the test so we can keep the data, what do you foresee, what could be part of the solution, or some of the options that you see that we could be supporting?
Yeah, so my biggest worry is about the gap between when there's a vote and we get results and when anybody could take action, right? So take somebody who's a senior this year. Say they are in some programs where they're receiving credit for their high school classes, they're getting decent grades, and those high school classes are pretty basic. Basic enough that they couldn't even take a swing at passing the MCAS. But if we're saying what's good enough is, well, you've met your high school's curriculum requirements, you have good grades, you're fine, off you go. Where is kind of the leverage for a family to be able to push back and say, wait a minute, this student would not have passed the MCAS and would not have been graduating, say this passes, and they have other things that they need. They're not done yet. If you look at their IEP, we haven't gotten through this, but yet there's an argument on, a school side. And I'm not saying that would happen here. I'm not saying that would happen anywhere, but we're opening that door, right? There are students who get challenging classwork because a parent can walk in and say, hey, this is what it takes to graduate. How are we going to get my kid there? And the team has a conversation. But when you move that line, this is now an equity question for a lot of those families. And when you take a look at the, I'm not coming up with the right term here, I want to say it's employment transition services. The pre-employment transition services are only available to you if you're still in the system. But if you have been told you're graduating and off you go, there is no do-over. You are now out and you have to go and figure out what your next steps are with life, and you may not be prepared for that yet. So, like, that's where I really struggle with what's written right now. It's a great political statement, but it's not very good policy. And so I'm wondering what happens in that gap. How do we protect families that might find themselves in that situation? How is there a conversation then between schools and families about when is a kid really ready to move on into the world if the MCAS used to be the thing that we had to stick a pin in it and it goes away?
Thank you, I appreciate it. Do you feel like if we're setting requirements in terms of, okay, 3 years of English and 2 years of science, or do you feel like those are any, I mean, or we need more data than those years of requirement?
You need more data. You should ask about what's being taught. And I will give the specific example of a student going into a significantly separate program starting in 7th grade, doing menu math all the way up through the end of junior year. Basic arithmetic, nothing more than that. So you can imagine what it's like for that student to sit down in front of an MCAS. They don't sit there very long because you take a look at it and what can you do with that. The conversation for a parent in that position is, okay, when are we going to get this student prepared to try and take this? When are we even going to try? So whatever we come up with, we should know what it is we expect of kids to be able to do. And if they need more time, give them more time. And the other thing that's hard about this is these are your kids in special ed. And guess what? We just talked about how expensive that is. There's every motivation for a school district that's in financial crisis to look at that and go, it's hard to make those decisions. There's a lot. It's complicated.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you. Oh, all right. Leela's going to make a very quick comment. This is the way it always works.
Oh, that was wild. My question is, I appreciate you all being here and the interest in coming again next year. As a matter of like practicality, what is the best way to like maintain communication with you as school budgets flex and things change in the legislature?
Well, I think you have appointed a legislative liaison who is not Jenny. Is it Jenny? It's both of you. Oh, hence the email that was written by Ginny but sent by Leela.
We're so engaged,
Okay.
we have 2 liaisons.
Yeah. Well, I'll just speak for myself. You know, I think I'd be happy to come in every year, but I think, you know, maintaining that line of communication, we do talk anyway, and I'm happy to formalize that if you want to do that periodically. I think that there are certain times of the year that are most important for us to be connecting. Certainly going into the legislative filing deadline, which is in mid-January, and our budget requests, which for Rep. Sena and I will happen in, our meetings with Ways and Means will happen in March or April of 25. Entering those time periods is critical.
January, we're filing bills, so that's also another important timeline, timeline to know, so keep us posted by a certain date.
And I think I would just add, I mean, you can always, anyone can email us, and I think we're all very responsive, so, yep. So.
We have a select board member from the town.
Mr. Chair, I know you don't usually take comments, but I wonder if, while our delegation is here, if you'd take a comment. So I'd just like to point out when we're talking about finances, one reason that Acton and Boxborough are different, and either it has to be in the formula or solved in another way, is we have lots of school-age kids per capita. Or more relevant to this discussion, lots of school-age kids per taxpayer. Somehow the formula needs to address that. So for example, we have 3.5 times the number of school-age kids per capita as Boston. 3.5 times. So I understand that the funding formula is designed for gateway cities, and I'm completely on board with that, and I understand the needs of those communities. But a consideration in the funding has to be the number of kids that we're educating. Our district does an excellent job, right? We have a really above average district. We spend an average amount per student to get an above average result. And we spend, on average, $18,000 some odd a student, right? The $104 per student we get from the state barely registers in that, right? $1,000 per student would be a very nice start, right? And a per student, or somehow taking into account the number of students per taxpayer, is, addresses a different level of need than being a gateway city. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, again, I want to thank you for coming. You can tell that we're a little scarred from our budget talks and process from last year. It was a very difficult year. I will say that kudos to our administration for catching this very early. Peter was out in front of our town's finance committees and in front of us, telling us very early that we had challenge. Last year, I think Peter and the district produced something around 6 different budget options for us. Our goal for this year is to have 1, maybe 2 budget options. So there's a lot of, he's got his fingers crossed. There's that's a 1?
As Superintendent Peter Lights, we're working on the fence. I just wanted to kind of update you on that, on the boardwalk. So we sent a letter to the MBTA where we wanted them to make sure they pay for it. So I just wanted to update that.
Thank you. And just background for school committee, one of the things that we started a few years ago as we started the Boardwalk Campus Building Project was really thinking about the fact that we actually have a school campus that has no physical barrier between an elementary school and a high-speed train track. If you watch the speed that goes by, it's going by, really quickly. And we actually have had an incident that we can point to where an individual went onto the tracks during the school day. It was not a student, to be clear, but that had a significant impact on the school and the community. It would be very short dollars for the MBTA to have a fence. Any type of fence would be appreciated, but something with a sound barrier would certainly be the optimal. And I appreciate the fact that this has been a work in progress. I know anything with, the MBTA is at least equally challenging as dealing with either Verizon or the grid.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, again. I really appreciate your time coming to speak with us, and you can look forward to an invitation again next year, if not sooner. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to move on to our ongoing business. First item on ongoing business is our diligent platform. So looking for feedback from the committee. This, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, this is our first meeting using fully digital platform. I know Peter's eagerly waiting to get some feedback on this from you all, but any thoughts? How's it been going? Did everyone, was it easy enough to get the information? Vikram.
I liked it at first, when it first came out, and then there was a period like, oh my God, what is this? And then I walked in here, I was like, oh my God, how can I find anything? But in the course of about half an hour, everything's there, I can see everything. I like it a lot more than the old method. And I think it's working really well.
Are you saying you didn't review the agenda before the meeting?
No, I
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I have larger monitors at home. I have big monitors, and here I have this, my laptop screen, so.
So the comment is, when you reviewed it in advance at home on a giant monitor, it was great. And then when you came in here on a single monitor, it took you a little time to get used to it.
There are a few bumps. There are a few bumps along the way.
Clear. Thank you.
But it's great.
I also like it. I think that it's, fairly seamless. I find it easy to use. I do have a question, though, because in preparing for this policy subcommittee meeting tomorrow, I was wondering if we have the access or if anyone has been successful that can show me how to take minutes on a meeting.
Yeah, so that is going to be a work in progress. I think Julie and I need to, and I've talked to Adam about this, I think Julie and my preference is to continue subcommittee meeting minutes the way we were doing them before. There are some nuances to doing it in diligent, and I'm very worried about Julie's capacity add more work to her plate and there's just some back-end systems. I mean, we don't have a team working on this. In fact, our tech team was pared down, so the only two people on this right now are Julie and I. And so, the other thing we wanted to do, we tightened up postings for our school councils, which we recognized were a problem in prior years, that we weren't doing those as publicly posted meetings. But that resulted in her now posting over 150 meetings a year, which was one of the reasons that we went to this platform. Is it's just not a doable job for one person. So I would prefer to keep meeting minutes for subcommittees in the way we had done them traditionally for now. Let's get settled in this platform and then make an informed decision about how we move that forward. So I think right now I'm going to suggest just keep with what you were doing. You send them in, Julie takes them, you get them in the packet and review them. The school committee, on the other hand, we are moving forward with the new way because we want to learn how to use it and understand the nuances of it. But we found a couple of glitches today, last minute, in terms of how we had posted the minutes that we had to undo. So I want to be a little cautious right now, so I'd like to hold off.
I will add to that. Peter and I have had some conversations about the minute taking in our subcommittee meetings. I know as someone who has to take those from time to time, it can be challenging. So it's one of the things that we can look at through our budget process as well. We need to be in compliance with open meeting law, but oftentimes it's difficult for a member to be contributing and taking notes and then go back to their job for 5 hours and then at 9 p.m. go back and type up the minutes. So it's something that we can also make a choice around, and some municipalities have as well, where they have an hourly rate and they find someone and they pay someone to do this, or there are burgeoning AI tools that can help us with this as well. So I think we want to look at this some more, but individually, I'm happy to have you all give me some feedback about this, because hopefully at some point each of you have had to do some subcommittee minutes, and so it would be good to know how much you despise it and how much you're willing to pay to make it go away, or if you want to use that money somewhere else. I mean, this is just another one of the choices we have to make.
I think I felt a lot like Vikram, where I'm not like a techie person. I don't get excited about change when it comes to technology. When my phone updates, I get very scared and mad. So when I started using this, I was a little worried, but I will say it's, so actually improves my ability to see, the things on the side, all the list, and then open things and have it all right there. And so I really do appreciate this upgrade. And I think that, for other people seeing the information, it's more cohesive and easy to read and accessible, and it makes more sense than, the previous way of doing it. I do think that in this time of tough budgets, as you brought up, possibly paying somebody to do the minutes, I think that we do have to sort of justify paying for programming or anything that we're doing to say, like, is this giving us enough improvement and taking enough off of important people's plates so they can do other things. I do think that this was a good move, but that question is out there.
I think a lot of it is around compliance too. This makes us infinitely more compliant to regulations.
I have two questions. Number one is what happened to all the archived meeting agendas and minutes? I can't find it. I think the link's broken. Okay, great. The other thing is that I haven't tried it, but I do have a question. So if I take notes on the website, can I download it? Where does it go?
You're talking about when you make a note in your own version of the agenda, correct?
I'm talking about, if I click...
Note?
Yeah.
Yeah, so first, I can point out one part of that. First of all, the notes that you take are yours and yours alone, so they're memory notes for you. If you take them on the platform, that's where they are, and they're not available to anybody else. So that was one question that we got and one point of clarification, so no one else sees your notes. The second question you have is then, can you print that out as a PDF? I don't know, we'd have to look at that, but the benefit of the platform is that it's there, and for your user, those notes are there in that version of the agenda.
Okay.
You can print out your notes. It'll just come kind of integrated into your agenda.
Look at that. We've already had people messing around enough to figure that out. Tori.
I don't think I've broken it yet, but then based on the comments about the minutes, maybe I have. I like it. The thing I'm finding not useful to me, just because I refuse to wear reading glasses, is that you cannot make the notes text any larger than it comes. Not even if you blow up the size of your browser window. So I find that very frustrating. I will say that the search function is wonderful, and John Peterson has departed, but he caused me to have to use it this week, and it worked beautifully. I was able to answer a question on the fly on the phone, so that was impressive. And yes, the link is broken to the archived agendas. I had to go back in and find it.
All right, I think that was on the list of things that the team, Peter and Julie, are still working on getting put in place. Other feedback, comments on it? Yeah.
I don't know, sort of like if you were thinking about hiring somebody, would it be possible to sort of utilize some of the high school talent? You know, I think there's a lot of younger people who could very easily and quickly help us out with this.
That's a good point. We'll take a look at it.
Well, right.
All right, please continue to give us feedback on how it works. I think some of you saw that if you do open the members agenda, you'll see briefing notes inside the members agenda. We basically opened up the curtain on what the chair's agenda usually looked like, so I don't know all of those things by heart. That's actually a script there that Beth has created over the years. I know, gasp. But you're all, you know, it is a public document. You're all welcome to see that. It basically is the things that I say that are the legalese or the things that, you know, the very long thing I have to read about consent agenda. All right, let's move on to subcommittee and member reports. Let's start with budget.
All right. This is a very short one. The budget subcommittee met this past Monday, the 7th at 2 p.m. on Zoom. We finalized our discussion of our budget guidelines for this fiscal year and also our meeting schedule and priorities. And Peter also presented the updated method to deal with the budget transfer authority so that we're in keeping with the standards and guidelines. And that was it. It was short and sweet, got it done. Our next meeting will be Monday, the 21st at 2 p.m. on Zoom.
Thank you. I'll just point out that in that meeting, we have decided to have a budget Saturday. So you'll see this come out in the... Did you just make that happen? That was amazing. When you see our budget schedule, you will see that Saturday, February 8th is a budget Saturday. And Thursday, February 13th, we will not have a meeting. So we're not adding a meeting, but we're replacing one with another. The point is so that we can have, similar to what we had last year with our public representatives from both Acton and Boxborough here on a budget event. Lakshmi, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, where do I see the schedules?
The schedule hasn't been posted yet, so it's something that we've decided, and the budget calendar will come, I believe, at our next meeting for the committee to vote on. But I'm just giving everybody the heads up now that we did make that decision, that suggestion. We haven't all as a committee voted on it, but we're swapping the meeting on February 13th for a Saturday, February 8th, budget Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Policy Subcommittee. Liz.
Sorry, I was updating my calendar. The Policy Subcommittee met on Friday, September 27th at 7:30 a.m. via Zoom. We discussed the policy, which we did a first read of earlier this evening. In addition, we discussed a timeline for us reviewing the attendance policy to try and ensure that we stay in line with the task force around the attendance policy as well. We'll meet again tomorrow, October 11th at 7:30 a.m. via Zoom, and we plan to get back to the review and discussion of the Resource Forces resolution, which was first presented to us last year.
Excellent, thank you. Ben's not here this evening, but he did send me an update on Capital. Capital Sub met on October 2nd. Mark Hamill and Brendan Hearn provided a recap of the FY24 projects, so last year's projects. During the presentation, they noted that a reprioritization of some projects happened from the original plan. And then there was a discussion of the prioritization of projects for FY25. There is 2 sets of priorities right now for the upcoming year that they're looking at. And then there's a discussion regarding the importance of having access to some of those documents prior to future meetings so that more informed discussions can happen. They are meeting again on November 6th. think so. I didn't have it on here. No. Sorry. A little side conversation about whether or not we're going to do liaison reports. Yes, please. Okay, so we're going to do liaison reports after we have an elementary budget task force update and an ALG update from Tori.
All right, so the Elementary Budget Task Force met for the first time on Tuesday, October 8th at 6:30 p.m. right here in this auditorium, and it looked very different, and people were excited by that when they walked in. It was really cool. We sat, we had small groups, we had conversation. It was awesome. As voted, the task force is composed of those deemed essential to this work, a diverse group of interested volunteers, and randomly selected members who agreed to participate when we reached out to them. As a task force, we discussed open meeting law and the use of a form linked from our website. So if people ask how to provide public comment, that's how we're doing it. And we're using that due to the large size and limited meeting time of the task force. We talked about the importance of engaging with our community to best balance resources to meet the needs of students, staff, and taxpayers. The role of the task force in reviewing New Solutions K-12's work and making recommendations to the school committee. That'll happen in December. Project overview and the consultants' work, national trends in education, and funding education. And then in small groups, we discussed and shared about our understanding of the district's financial situation, areas necessary to investigate for potential savings, areas important to protect from cuts, and areas in which we might invest even while we're finding savings in others. Next meeting will be on Tuesday, October 26th at 6:30 p.m. right here. And then I guess I have to transition to my other tab. ALG met 7:30 on October 9th at Acton's Town Hall and on Zoom. Points of discussion included a fiscal year 25 update and updates to the multi-year financial model. Of note, the Select Board does not want to use any of the $1.2 million in untaxed levy in fiscal year 26. And somebody had good news with budget for a change. The town's free cash balance is actually expected to be higher than forecasted due to increased local receipts from vehicle revenues last year. So some good news for a change. And then we brought in circuit breaker, and there went the good news bubble. We also discussed future facilities needs, such as the Public Works building. We don't know if ALG will decide to take on discussing debt exclusion projects. However, in that event, we would like to ask the capital sub to provide us with information about the district's capital priorities and potential timelines. The next meeting will be November 27th at 7:30 a.m. in Acton Town Hall and on Zoom.
Thank you. Yenshin, did you have a question?
I did not have a question. Just for transparency's sake, I have had to withdraw from the budget task force due to schedule conflicts. I just want to note that.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to do liaison reports now. I don't have my list of liaisons in front of me, so I'm going to start with Liz.
I have an update from the Boxborough Finance Committee.
Yes, please.
The Boxborough Finance Committee met on Tuesday, October 1st at 7 p.m. The committee reviewed several upcoming projects and initiatives which will be budget considerations for this year. This year, Boxborough will be negotiating 3 different union contracts, financing a new fire engine, and moving forward with discussions on a new fire department site. The committee is focused on being transparent and proactive in their budget communications, so I do expect that we will have ongoing dialogues with the committee during our own budget process.
Thank you. And in that time, I found the liaisonship list. Ben for Acton Select Board, who's not here this evening. Do you have an update, Rebecca, from the Acton Finance Committee?
I sure do, and then I also have the joint PTSO. So the Acton Finance Committee met on Tuesday, the 8th at 8 p.m. at the Town Hall. That was a later time than usual to ensure members could attend the first elementary budget task force if they wanted to, because that was the same night. The meeting mainly focused on the continuing discussion around the DPW project, with members asking for more data collection before considering a vote. Town Manager John Mangiarotti and Dean Charter from the Select Board presented, sort of a high overview of the project, including the timeline and concerns about the current building. And then they fielded questions. Dean made a passionate advocacy speech in support of the project and mentioned how important these investments are and how a typical timeline is about every 10 years to take on a big project. The takeaway from all of that was really that the override last year was a big ask from taxpayers, and several Finance Committee members expressed a desire to see savings found in the school district budget to offset the cost of the DPW building project, among others. I will say that there was little to no mention of the workers affected by what happens to the DPW, reflecting the discourse around school budget, how the school budget tends to be focused mainly around cost and sort of forgetting the human element a lot of times when we're discussing this in the community. The next Finance Committee meeting will be, the Acton Finance Committee meeting will be the 22nd of October at 8 p.m. at the Town Hall. And then I will do the joint PTSO as well. So we met this past Monday, the 7th, at 7 p.m. on Zoom. I gave a general overview of the school committee updates so far, including the start of the budget process for the year, the start of the elementary budget task force, the new school committee website rolling out, Diligent, that we just discussed, as well as the recent vote on the new SRO MOU. One member asked for a brief explanation of the SRO program and what changes were made to the MOU. And there was some concern expressed about the focus that the district has on chronic absenteeism, especially mentioning, what will be penalized. The language in the email that went out to families about the initiative seemed to create some worry about issues like chronically late buses, things that really aren't an issue, that really, are an issue for people and, aren't tied in with chronic absenteeism necessarily. So, I tried to sort of explain the idea behind the initiative and how it's an effort to connect with and help families, not penalize anyone, and that this is sort of, more of an equity issue. And I do think this highlights some of the disconnect and some of the need to still address, some basic communication with families and, the public at large. After that, other members representing the different schools went around to give an update on their activities, focusing on fundraising and creating inclusive events. Members helped each other problem solve and offered support, including how to best get newsletters out to families in a format that encourages actually reading them. I guess the click-through rate isn't great on some of the Parent Square stuff, maybe because we get so much of it. And then, and this is really important, there was a request made to think about joining Project Graduation, both in a leadership capacity and volunteering on the night itself. They barely got enough people to join to pull it off this year, and it's such an important event for the graduating students. So we really need to get people to consider joining that. And the next joint PTSO meeting will be November 4th at 7 p.m. on Zoom.
Excellent, thank you. Legislative liaisons, we know what you guys are working on. Thank you very much for this evening. Special Education Parent Advisory Council hasn't met since our last meeting, and the Boxborough Select Board also has not met since our last meeting. So that gets us through all of those updates. It is 9:30, so I'm going to skip us past the school committee communication goal update and move us on to the consent agenda. I want to point out something very special and very new. Our warrants have been added to the consent agenda, so there is no need for someone to read all of those large numbers over and over again. We confirmed this with all of the advisors that that is acceptable. And so, as such, items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote. If you would like us to hold and discuss an item, please say hold. Otherwise, everything will be approved with one vote. Items on the consent agenda include approval of our ABRHS meeting minutes of 9/19/2024, a donation to the ABRHS Counseling Department, the Blanchard PTF proposed budget for 24-25, the McCarthy Town PTSO or PTO proposed budget for 24-25, and approval of warrants as presented in our packet from 10/10/2024. Seeing no one, oh gosh, I think I read this too fast and I missed something. Is there a motion? That's what I'm supposed to say now.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstained? That is unanimous. It is approved. Thank you very much. I'll point out in the FYI, there's a very interesting update about the CASE program. It will take you all of 3 minutes to read, and I think we'll find some really interesting information in there about some of the programs that are offered by CASE and the quantity of students and the amount of participation from our district in that amazing program, both through transportation and through some of their specialized programs. And with that,
move to adjourn.
Second.
so that was Tori and then Leela. I apologize. I know Beth is watching tonight. I did not reconfirm who made the motion and the second on the consent agenda. Hopefully she got it. If not, she'll just go back and rewind, and then we'll decide it later. We have a motion and a second for adjournment. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.